Jersey City Board of Education candidate Joel Torres sat down with Hudson County View to discuss his candidacy, starting with his background in Jersey City and education.
My name is Joel Torres. I'm born and raised here in Jersey City. I've lived throughout various parts of the city, including the Greenville area, down in Duncan Avenue, to living in downtown in Villa Borinquen, now to where I'm at in the Heights. I'm a father of 3 children who are currently in a public school in Jersey City. I've been active with the schools for the past 7 years since my daughter started kindergarten. And for the past 2 years now, I've been the PTA president over at the school where my children are at. I've been working actively, not just when I was a PTA president, but when I was just a regular PTA member, just working actively to try to help out in whichever way I could to improve the schools and improve our school locally in our area. Also along the lines, I went to a lot of board meetings. I was there back in the day when Mr. DeHere, when Mr. McCann, Mr. LaRose, all of them were on the board. And so I've been active, and I wasn't really fully active in the meetings, but I was more of getting myself educated, acclimated into the system, what's going on, and how can I fit into learning more about the systems. From there, I became more active. I did not go to a lot of meetings for the past couple of years, only because I went back to school to get a master's. And that's the only reason I wasn't able to go to meetings, because I had Thursday night classes, and it's hard to be at 2 places at once when you have master's classes.
Torres, who currently works in drug and alcohol prevention, said changing the tobacco policy to include a ban on vaporizers is a simple change that can make Jersey City public schools better for children.
One very simple policy that I actually brought to the attention of Dr. Lyles a couple months back, but it hasn't been moved forward, is the fact that we have a tobacco policy in place. It's a very simple, policy, very simple changes. But now we have an increase in electronic smoking device usage. And from my work in Essex County and the kids that I work with, my youth leaders, we found out that within the schools there are a lot of young individuals who are using vape pens, what they call electronic smoking devices, and e-cigarettes. And what they're using it for is not just for smoking, electronic smoking tobacco, etc. They're also using it for marijuana and other uses. So one simple policy change would be tweaking the wording within the tobacco policy to include electronic smoking devices. A lot of people don't know that electronic smoking devices are treated the same way as regular cigarettes, so you cannot smoke them in any public places in the state of New Jersey.
Torres also spoke about the politics surrounding his decision to not accept an appointment to a vacant board seat in 2012, his involvement with a Jersey City education reform group known as Parents for Progress, and if his views on education policy have shifted in the past few years.
Just to clarify, I was never a member of the Parents for Progress. Back in the time when I was a part of a selection committee to select 3 individuals, we had a lot of individuals who were part of that group. I resigned and I left that group, seeing that my educational philosophy was completely different from what was being promoted within that group, and a lot of individuals left as well afterwards. It wasn't until after the fact that I learned that there was a small group that was creating Parents for Progress. So that's just a little bit of clarification about the background of that. As far as my educational philosophy, it's always been the same. I've always been a public school advocate. I've always been an advocate for the children, and a lot of individuals who were part of that original group had the same thing that I had in mind, trying to do the best for our children and our parents and all our teachers here in the city. Now, what happened was I realized early, a couple of people realized a little bit afterwards, that our educational philosophies didn't really mesh. It wasn't really what it seemed to be, so therefore, I left, and instead of leaving and just going to the shadows, I left and I became more active in my local school. The reason I did not take the appointment was because I felt personally there was a conflict of interest, being that I was on a selection committee that was selecting 3 individuals, and not to say that anybody would use that as some type of campaign strategy to promote 3 candidates, but I just personally felt, by talking to my wife, that I didn't want that on my on my morale. I have ethics. I'm very ethical. I have morals, and I just didn't feel that would be right. So that's the reason that I did not take the appointment. But like I stated, I stayed very active, and I thankfully through the promotion of my parents there at PS 27, I became the PTA president and became very active in our school, and we did a lot of things moving forward, even though I wasn't part of a citywide group.
I followed up by asking him whether he would renew the contract of School Superintendent Dr. Marcia Lyles if elected to the board.
Well, I'll say what I said to Dr. Lyles when I interviewed for SUMAC's empty position. The rhetoric is great. what's on paper is beautiful. The plan looks nice, but what's actually happening is something different. So if Dr. Lyles would like to continue as superintendent, some things would have to change. If you look at the morale of the district right now, if you look at the respect that's being given to not just the teachers, which is, there's a lack of respect there as well. There's a lack of respect to parents. There's a lack of respect to students. We don't have a teacher's contract right now, which is causing a lot of low morale with our teachers. It's going to cause a heck of a headache for the taxpayers moving down the line. What if, when a contract will be ratified in the future, just like New York City, what happened with them, they just had to ratify a contract with the teachers, and it ended up spending a lot for the taxpayers, just because it wasn't done properly and it wasn't done equitably and fairly like it should be. But then also the parents are being mistreated when they go to meetings and they're not allowed to talk, or they're allowed to talk about their issues, but it's not recorded. So if somebody can't go to the meeting and they're at home, they don't know what's going on. They don't see what's really going on in the district. And then students come up and talk, and they're being disrespected because their views and their opinions are not being heard, but they're not being respected, and there's no action being taken. So when that culture comes from the top, so if that culture is not changed, I really would need to look at questioning the renewal of a contract for a superintendent.
Finally, I asked Torres about what he plans to achieve if elected to the board.
Short-term goals would be, number one, returning public comments back to being recorded. The public needs to see what's going on. We need to be more open and transparent. So that's goal number one. Goal number two is ratifying a teacher's contract and making sure that our teachers are paid equitably and fairly. Going long term, it's like I stated before, changing the culture, making sure that we have a culture where there's respect for everyone within our school district. Every stakeholder should feel that they're respected and they're being heard. So 3 years down the line, if I'm elected by the people on November 4th, 3 years down the line, I'd like to say that there's a change in the culture, thanks to Joel Torres and the rest of the board members for changing this culture and making it more respectful and making it more united to make sure that all of our students succeed here in the city.
I'm Michael Shuren with Hudson County View, the eye of the community.